Do you know the quiet ache of being an observer, not a participant? They stand in the warmth of connection, yet feel the chilling expanse of a vast, empty sea. This is the paradoxical tragedy of feeling utterly alone in a crowd. The scene is set, a room full of sound, laughter, and proximity. Yet, an invisible distance persists. This is the condition of deep, paradoxical loneliness. It is not the raw, existential ache of being utterly deserted, but the sharp, refined suffering of 1,000 conversations you cannot join. The experience feels like being enclosed within a perfectly clear, soundproof bubble, or standing behind a pane of flawless glass. You see every detail of the human connection unfolding. The genuine smile, the subtle lean of shared trust, the comfortable synchronization of body language. You observe the rhythm of interaction with a startling clinical clarity. But the sound is muffled, the warmth does not transfer. And every attempt to bridge the gap feels like pressing your hand against an immovable, transparent barrier. You are spectating your own life. You have become a critical, meticulous observer in a theater where you should be a principal actor. The awareness of your own solitude is magnified precisely because you are surrounded by potential connection. It is not the loneliness of the mountain peak. It is the silent tragedy of the heart, standing alone on a crowded shore. This isolation demands a profound, quiet effort. They must hold a mask of composed engagement, nodding at the right moments, calibrating a smile that suggests belonging. The energy required for this performance is exhausting. It drains the entire reserve, ensuring that the moment of departure, the silent retreat back into undisputed physical aloneness, is met not with dread, but with a sudden, weary relief. The essential core self has receded far behind the eyes, taking shelter. This presence, yet non-participation, is the quiet admission of the person who feels lonely in a crowd. They are fundamentally guarding against the possibility of being rejected by enacting the rejection first. They are safe, contained, and utterly, perfectly lonely. The feeling of isolation in proximity is not a sudden, random affliction. It is a meticulously learned response. To truly understand the function of the glass wall, one must look back toward the first empty room. The foundation of this pattern is often built during the earliest attempts at genuine connection. The child, in their necessary vulnerability, extended a hand, a feeling, a fear, a simple cry for recognition. But the environment, for reasons beyond their control, was not consistently available to receive it. Perhaps the caregiver was physically present, but emotionally distant, overwhelmed, or simply unable to tolerate the child's distress. The emotional offering was met not with explicit rejection, but with a null response, a silence, a redirection, or a quiet withdrawal that felt heavier than any refusal. To the young mind, the lesson was clear and devastating. Vulnerability is expensive. Showing true need leads not to comfort, but to a profound, quiet sense of being unanchored. Since the fundamental human need for connection cannot be eliminated, the self develops a crucial, protective strategy: the self-sufficiency myth. The child learns to withdraw the offering before it can be ignored. They become an independent emotional unit, convinced that the only truly safe place for their feelings is inside their own perimeter. This early wiring creates an internal anchor of self-reliance, which serves both as a remarkable strength and as a confining cage. As an adult, this person carries the ghost of that past into every crowded room. The external connection, no matter how genuine its intent, is unconsciously filtered through the primal memory of the empty room. They anticipate the null response before the exchange even begins, and they deploy the protective glass wall preemptively. The quiet tragedy is that the adult is still honoring a self-preservation contract signed by the child. The phenomenon of feeling lonely in a crowd can be described not merely as a feeling, but as a deeply entrenched psychological strategy, a change in frequency. Psychologically, this is often linked to avoidant attachment patterns. The internal system desires intimacy, the fundamental human drive. But the learned alarm system registers true closeness as a threat to independence. When the body senses proximity and connection, the nervous system triggers a subtle defensive response. This is not a fear of people, but a chronic, preemptive fear of vulnerability, fear of the dependency that closeness might require. The core cognitive element at play is hypervigilance. They cannot simply relax and be in the environment. Instead, their mind is constantly scanning, assessing the mood, predicting social risks, monitoring their own performance, and verifying the complete absence of genuine threat. This intense internal processing consumes all available bandwidth. While others are connecting naturally, the person is utilizing their mental energy to maintain their safety within the social framework. This internal state creates the experience of being tuned into a separate frequency, while the room operates on the shared wavelength of casual, unguarded interaction. The lonely self is tuned into the high alert channel of surveillance. The cognitive dissonance is profound. The rational mind understands, I am safe here, but the body's primal memory whispers, you must be ready to retreat at any moment. To protect itself from this exhausting tension, the mind often deploys mild forms of dissociation. The self separates slightly from the physical body, performing the social ritual. This separation creates the glass wall. It allows the person to observe the scene without having to fully invest the fragile core self. The loneliness, in this scientific context, is the inevitable byproduct of an exquisitely calibrated survival mechanism designed to prevent any possible emotional casualty. The tragedy of the separate frequency is that it is entirely self-perpetuating. The lonely self is not indifferent to connection. In fact, the desire for genuine intimacy may burn with a profound, painful intensity just beneath the surface. This creates the central, exhausting inner conflict. The gravitational pull toward closeness versus the reflexive repulsion deployed by the defense mechanism. The interior mind is structured like a fortress. There is a deeply guarded gate, locked and bolted from the inside. The self may approach this gate, peer through the bars, and watch the warmth and light that lies just outside, feeling the powerful pull to participate. They might even try to unlock it, pushing a small, calibrated smile or sharing a carefully edited story. But the moment the external world, a kind word, an earnest look, a moment of deep understanding, gets too close, the inner guard immediately slams the bolt back into place. This resistance is driven by an unacknowledged emotional truth. The deepest, most terrifying fear is not simply being rejected, but being seen and then rejected. Being seen requires full vulnerability, and the internal system remembers the catastrophic price of vulnerability from the empty room of the past. It registers the act of opening as an invitation to catastrophe. Therefore, the safest position, the position that guarantees emotional survival, is always the perimeter. They maintain the loneliness not because they choose isolation, but because the alternative feels like psychic annihilation. The guard at the gate is a manifestation of self-love that has been distorted by early experience. It believes it is protecting the very core of the self, ensuring survival by resisting the very thing, deep, unguarded connection that could lead to a sense of true belonging. The energy of this daily resistance is what ultimately exhausts the soul and renders the crowded room so profoundly desolate. The turning point does not arrive with a dramatic collapse or a sudden epiphany. It begins with a tiny, persistent question that surfaces in a moment of clarity. The person is sitting in the familiar setting, perhaps another quiet moment of spectral observation, and the thought surfaces, what if this pervasive loneliness is not happening to me, but is actively being performed by me? This recognition is the critical moment when the self steps back from the guard at the gate and sees the fortress walls, not as an inevitable reality, but as a meticulously constructed defense. It is the understanding that the feeling of deep isolation is not evidence of a personal defect, but evidence of a brilliant, albeit outdated, survival strategy. This realization is profoundly frightening because it shifts the entire burden of responsibility. For so long, the comfortable narrative was, the world is unwilling to genuinely connect with me. The new, harder, and ultimately liberating narrative is, I am consistently and preemptively unwilling to risk letting the world connect with the authentic self. This recognition breaks the old victim narrative and, for the first time, introduces the element of choice. The first step toward change is not action, but naming the pattern. It is naming the hypervigilance, naming the moment of mental retreat, and naming the precise surge of the desire to flee. This act of naming creates a crucial therapeutic distance. You no longer are the loneliness. You become the one observing the loneliness. You notice the precise moment the glass wall goes up, the tightening in the chest, the subtle mental separation, the need to retreat. This observation is the first ripple of change. By watching the defense mechanism in action without judgment or condemnation, the person honors the child who built the fortress while simultaneously informing the adult that the immediate danger is over. The door is still locked, but for the first time, they hold the key and acknowledge that the decision to open it belongs entirely to them. The journey from the guarded gate to true connection is not a leap across a perilous ocean. It is a slow, careful navigation into a small harbor. The goal is no longer to dismantle the fortress instantly, but to patiently redefine what truly constitutes safety. Safety is not achieved by the absence of vulnerability, but by the internal reassurance that you can tolerate the emotional sting if a connection fails, or if a moment of vulnerability is met with less than ideal reciprocity. This requires establishing an internal anchor. The self begins by shifting focus from predicting external acceptance to cultivating internal validation. The powerful self-reliance learned in the empty room is carefully redirected, transforming it from a defense against connection into a foundational strength for connection. The practical steps are taken in microdoses. The person starts by allowing the glass wall to have a small, deliberate crack. They might choose one specific interaction in a crowd to be fully present for, listening not to formulate a quick response, but simply to hear the meaning. They share one detail that carries a faint charge of genuine, unedited emotion, observing how the nervous system reacts to this small, controlled exposure. This process is fundamentally about tolerating the awkwardness. True intimacy often feels messy, uncomfortable, and inefficient, which is precisely what the hypervigilant mind seeks to avoid. When the familiar anxiety spikes, when the urge to retreat or dissociate arises, they must practice self-compassion, reminding the system, "We are safe now. We are simply feeling an old memory. We do not have to leave." The small harbor is built one moment of tolerated presence at a time. It is a slow, gentle integration of the guarded self with the vulnerable self. They learn that the greatest strength is not the ability to withstand permanent isolation, but the quiet courage to remain standing, slightly exposed, when surrounded by the beautiful, unpredictable risk of others. The journey does not end with the permanent erasure of loneliness. That would be an unrealistic demand on the complexity of the human condition. Instead, it concludes with a gentle return to the self and a necessary redefinition of what true solitude means. The self, having navigated the harbor, understands that occasionally feeling alone, even in a densely crowded room, is not a failure, but simply a feature of being a distinct, sovereign consciousness. The difference now is the absence of the glass wall. When solitude arrives, it is no longer oppressive or required. It is a chosen, comfortable space. They allow the quiet moment of observation to exist without the urgent pressure of performance or the exhausting demand to integrate instantly. The core paradox has resolved. True connection is no longer defined by external reception, but by internal authenticity. The person measures success not by the number of friends they acquire, but by the precise depth of truth they are willing to share. They no longer seek to fit into the crowd, but simply to stand in the crowd, secure in their own unique shape and form. They realize that the immense strength learned in the empty room, the profound self-reliance, was never the enemy of connection. It was merely a tool used poorly. Now, that robust internal foundation allows them to enter relationships not out of a desperate foundational need, but out of a genuine, balanced desire. This final stage is one of quiet acceptance. The ghost of the empty room may still whisper, but its voice is now soft and distant. The glass wall may occasionally flicker back into place out of old habit, but now the hand holds the key, and the duration of the lock is measured in minutes, not years. This is the gentle return, the quiet, profound realization that the self, once so desperately guarded, is now safe enough to simply be wherever they may find themselves.